The smallest of the three had stopped crying, and that was the thing that frightened Eliza Vance most of all. The other two still fussed in the cradle, thin and reedy, their fists working against the cold. But the third lay still under his blanket, his lips gone the color of skimmed milk, and he did not cry when she lifted him. A baby that does not cry is not a baby at peace. She had buried enough to know the difference. She pressed her ear to his chest and counted, and the count was wrong. And outside the window the Montana wind threw snow against the glass, like it was trying to get in and finish what the winter had started. If your heart is already in that cradle, if you believe that one person paying attention can stand between a child and the grave, then subscribe to this channel. Drop the name of your city in the comments below. See how far this story travels. Every name, it means the world to me. Now stay close, because what Eliza Vance noticed in the next hour was something 3 doctors and a grieving father had walked past for 2 weeks, and it would change everything for the silent house on Hardin Creek. The year was 1884, and the place was a cattle ranch 4 miles outside the town of Hardin Creek, in the cold high country of western Montana, where winter came early and stayed like a debt no one could pay off. Eliza Vance had come up from Kansas on the strength of a single advertisement and a single fact. The man who placed it had not asked what she looked like. She had learned a long time ago that most men asked. They asked before they asked anything else, and she had watched their faces do the arithmetic and come up short. She was a large woman. She had been a large woman her whole life, broad through the shoulders and wide at the hip, and she had stopped explaining it to people around the time she stopped expecting them to be kind. So when the advertisement asked only for a housekeeper who could manage a sick household and was not afraid of hard winters, she had answered it the same day. The stagecoach driver who carried her the last leg talked the whole way, the way men talk when a silence makes them nervous. "Silas Crane," he said when she gave the name. "You're going to Crane's place." He shook his head slowly. Lost his wife at the birth. Triplets, 3 boys, all at once, and her gone in the same night. Folks didn't think the babies would see a week. That was near a month ago, and they're still breathing, but barely. He's had 2 women out there already. Both quit. Said the place was too sad to stand. Said the man don't speak. Doesn't speak how? Doesn't speak at all, ma'am. Not since the burial. Runs the ranch by pointing. Folks say he's halfway to the grave himself and just hasn't told his legs yet. He glanced at her sideways, the way they all did. Strong woman like yourself might last longer than the others, or might not. That house has a way of emptying people out. The town itself was a single street of gray buildings hunched against the weather. When she climbed down to wait for the wagon, she felt the eyes find her the way she had felt it her whole life. That long measuring look that started at her face and traveled down and made it swing judgment somewhere around her boots. 2 women outside the dry goods store stopped talking when she passed. "That's the new one for Crane," one said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Lord, they keep sending them bigger." A small laugh shared between them. Eliza Vance picked up her trunk with both hands. She had learned that stopping only gave them the satisfaction of watching it land. She did not stop. She carried her trunk to the end of the boardwalk and set it down to wait, and she kept her eyes on the road where the wagon would come, and she did not give them her face to read. The ranch, when she reached it, was worse than the driver had said. Not from laziness. She could see that even in the failing light. The fences sagged and the barn door hung at a tired angle, and the front step had rotted soft at one corner, and all of it had the look of a place where a man had simply stopped seeing the surfaces of things because the person who made surfaces matter was under the ground. Smoke came thin and reluctant from the chimney. A house can grieve. This one was. Silas Crane met her at the door with a lamp in his hand and said nothing at all. He was younger than she'd expected and worn older than his years, with a beard gone untended and eyes that had the flat, scoured look of a man who had cried until there was nothing left and then kept standing, because the cattle still needed feeding. He looked at her. She braced for the arithmetic. It did not come. He was too far gone for it. He simply stepped back and let her in. "Mr. Crane," she said, "Eliza Vance. Your advertisement said room, board, and $20 the month. I keep a clean house and I tend the sick, and I don't quit a thing once I've started it." She set down her trunk. "Where are the children?" He pointed. The room at the back was close and dark and too hot, the stove banked high against the cold, the air thick with the smell of milk gone sour in too many bodies and not enough open window. 3 cradles, pushed together, 3 small faces. and she knew, the moment she crossed the threshold and looked into them, that two of these babies were fading, and the third had nearly already gone. She did not say so. She rolled her sleeves to the elbow and got to work. The first night she did not sleep. She moved between the cradles and the stove and the basin, learning the children the way you learn a piece of land, by walking every inch of it. The two larger boys, she decided, had a chance. They took the bottle weakly, but they took it. The smallest, Crane had not given her their names, and she would learn later he could not say them. The smallest would not feed at all. He turned from the bottle. He arched and stiffened when she held him a certain way, and went slack and gray when she laid him flat. He cried without sound, his mouth open, no air behind it. A doctor had been out 3 times, the driver had said, 3 times. And the man had pronounced it failure to thrive and weakness of constitution and the will of God, and had taken his fee and driven back to town through the snow. Failure to thrive. Liza had heard those words before over other cradles, and she had come to distrust them. They were the words men used when they had stopped looking. A baby that will not eat is not a riddle without an answer. It is a riddle no one has sat with long enough. She sat with it, in the gray hour before the second dawn, with the smallest boy against her shoulder and the stove ticking and Silas Crane asleep at last in the chair, by the door where he had refused to leave her alone with his sons. She noticed the thing. She had been about to feed him again. She tipped him gently to bring his mouth toward the bottle, and he turned away, not weakly, the way a tired baby turns, but hard, his whole small body recoiling as if from a blow, and she stopped. She held very still, and she did something she had not thought to do, because no one had, because everyone had been looking at the milk and the weight and the will of God. She put her smallest finger, clean, against the roof of the child's mouth, there, high up, where the hard palate should have closed and had not, a gap, a cleft, narrow but real, running back toward the soft palate, hidden so far up that you would never see it, unless you went looking with a fingertip in the dark. He could not feed lying back. The milk went the wrong way, into the place it must never go, and he choked and turned from it, and starved with a full bottle 6 inches from his face. The other two had milder versions of the same. She checked, finger by finger, her heart going hard, enough to make feeding a misery, not enough to be plain. 3 doctors and a father had looked at 3 failing boys for a month and seen weakness. She had put one finger in the dark and found the truth in under an hour, because she was the only one who had thought to ask the child instead of the chart. She did not wake Silas Crane to tell him. There was nothing to tell yet, only something to do. She went to the kitchen, which was its own disaster. The stove caked with 2 weeks of burnt residue, the basin smelling of standing water and grief, flour gone to mouse in an open barrel, and she did not waste a breath being dismayed by it. She found a clean rag and boiled it soft. She cut a teat from an India rubber sheet she'd packed for her own bad knee and worked it into the shape she needed, a long, soft thing she could lay along the side of the child's mouth, away from the gap, and she sat the smallest boy nearly upright against her chest. His head turned just so, and she gave him a single drop. He swallowed it. She gave him another. He swallowed that one too. And then, for the first time since she had walked into that house, the smallest of the Crane triplets latched and drank, and did not choke, and his fists came loose against her, and somewhere far down in his chest a sound started up that was small and cracked and furious and alive. He was crying. He had the breath to cry. She had never in her life been so glad to hear a baby make so much noise. She fed all 3 before the sun came up. She did not tell Silas Crane what she had found. She showed him. When he woke in the chair and looked at her, with the dread of a man who has learned to wake expecting the worst, she crossed the room and put the smallest boy in his arms, pink now, working, indignant, and she guided the father's own finger up into the child's mouth so that he might feel the thing himself. She watched his face change. She watched a man who had not spoken in a month open his mouth and close it again, and she understood that the silence was not stubbornness. It was a held breath. It was a man who had decided that if he never said it aloud, it might not be entirely true. "It's in the mouth," she said quietly, sparing him the need to ask. All 3, the smallest worst. They weren't refusing to eat, Mr. Crane. They were drowning every time they tried. Held up right, with the right teat, they'll feed. She paused. They'll live. He did not answer. He looked down at his son for a long time. Then he stood, and he went out, and she heard him in the yard-splitting wood he did not need, hard and steady for the better part of an hour, which she understood to be the only way he had left to weep. The days found a shape after that. She fed the boys every 2 hours, day and night, upright, patient, and they began to, ounces first, then the soft heaviness of children who are going to make it. She named them in her own head before he could bring himself to say them aloud. The eldest she heard him murmur once was Thomas, the middle Samuel, and the smallest, the one she had nearly lost and hadn't, she heard him call Wyatt very low when he thought no one was near. Silas Crane began to do things he did not announce. He fixed the rotten step without a word, and then the basin pump, and then the barn door that had hung tired for a month. He took to splitting her stove wood and stacking it by the kitchen door before she woke. And when she came down to find it there, she said nothing. And when she said nothing, he understood that nothing was the right thing to say. One evening, she came back from the well to find her own room had a stove in it that had not been there that morning, hauled in from somewhere and set and lit. He never mentioned it. She never mentioned it. The reader of a marriage learns to read the things that are done instead of said. It was Wyatt who broke first, the smallest, the one who had nearly gone. He was the one who 6 weeks on, fat-cheeked and ferocious, would not settle for anyone but her, who screamed for the particular bulk and warmth of her until she came, and who fell asleep against the broad of her chest with a fistful of her, collar gripped tight, the way a child holds to the one fixed thing in a moving world. Silas saw it from the doorway one night and did not come in. He stood and watched his son sleep on the housekeeper everyone in town had laughed at, and he had the look of a man watching the sun come up after a night he wasn't sure he would survive. Then the brother came. He arrived in February in a good coat, on a good horse, with a lawyer's letter in his saddlebag, and the easy confidence of a man who has never had to ask quite. Dietrich, Silas's older brother down from the bank in Helena, who had not troubled himself to come for the funeral, but had come now that there was property to be settled, and 3 motherless infants to be reasonable about. "You can't raise them, Silas," Dietrich said at the table, while Silas sat with his hands flat on the wood and said nothing because he could not. "Look at this place. Look at yourself. 3 babies and no wife, and his eyes went to Eliza, did the arithmetic she knew so well, and discarded her, a hired woman who won't stay past spring. There's a couple in Helena, childless, respectable. They'll take all 3, and you'll have done right by them. I've had papers drawn." He set the papers on the table. He produced a pen. And Silas Crane, who had not spoken a word in 2 months, who pointed where other men talked, opened his mouth, and could not. The words would not come. 2 months of held silence had rusted the door shut, and the reader could see him strain against it. The cord standing in his neck, his son's in the next room, his brother's pen held out, and nothing coming. So Eliza Vance spoke. "They're not going to Helena," she said. Dietrich looked at her the way you'd look at furniture that had begun to talk. "This isn't your affair. It became my affair the night I kept the youngest of those boys from dying in his cradle," she said, and she did not raise her voice. "While your brother grieved and your fine Helena doctors collected their fees and called it the will of God, that child had a cleft in the roof of his mouth that no one bothered to find. I found it. I've fed all 3 of them every 2 hours for 6 weeks. I know the weight of each of them to the ounce. I know which one sleeps if you hum, and which one won't, and which one has a temper that'll worry you when he's grown." She stood. She was a large woman, and she used all of it, and for once in her life she was glad of every inch. "You want to talk about who can raise these children? I'd think hard about which of the 2 of us in this room could tell their cries apart in the dark, because I can, and you don't even know their names." The silence that followed lasted a long time. Then, from the head of the table, came a sound none of them expected. Silas Crane laughed, once, rough and cracked like a hinge that hasn't turned in years, but a laugh, the first sound of joy that house had held since the burial. And then, with his brother staring, and his housekeeper standing, and his 3 sons asleep in the next room, Silas Crane found the door in his throat and put his shoulder to it. "Thomas," he said. His voice was wrecked and quiet. "Samuel Wyatt." He looked at his brother. "Those are their names." He swallowed. "Take your papers, Dietrich, and take your pen. There's the door, and there's 4 miles of snow between it and Helena, and I'd start walking before dark." Dietrich Crane took his papers and his pen and his good coat and went. The pen, Eliza noticed, he left on the table. She kept it. It seemed a fair price. That should have been the whole of it. But Hardin Creek is a small town, and a small town that has laughed at a woman does not stop on its own. The county had to be satisfied that 3 infants were properly kept, Dietrich having put the question to them out of spite on his way through. And so on a clear cold Sunday in March, Eliza Vance stood in the front room of the Hardin Creek Church before the same women who had counted her up the boardwalk in November, before the doctor who had called it the will of God 3 times and pocketed 3 fees, while the county man asked his questions, and the town watched, hungry, to see the big woman put in her place at last. It was Silas who answered. He had found his voice, and he had not wasted it since, but he did not waste it now either. He had used words so carefully his whole life, and he used them plainly. "My sons are alive," he said to the room, "because of this woman. 3 doctors couldn't find what she found in one night. She fed them when they couldn't feed. She has not slept a full night since November. There is not a person in this room who has done a tenth of what she has done, and most of you spent your kindness laughing at her up the boardwalk." He let that sit. The doctor studied his hat. "She is going to be my wife, if she'll have a man who took 2 months to learn to speak again, and whether she will or won't, she stays. These are her boys as much as mine. If anyone here has a quarrel with that, the door's behind you and the snow's not as deep as it was." No one had a quarrel. The doctor left first. The 2 women from the boardwalk found, when the meeting broke, that they had urgent reasons to be elsewhere, and the county man closed his book and shook Silas Crane's hand and said the children were plainly well kept, which everyone in the room had known before he opened his book at all. Eliza Vance, asked later that day on the cold drive home whether she would have him, said only that she had not crossed half the country and gone 2 months without proper sleep to leave a thing half finished. Silas Crane took that for the yes it was. They were married in April, when the snow on Hardin Creek had begun to go soft and the first green showed mean and stubborn along the south fence. The smallest boy, Wyatt, who had so nearly not lived to be named, gripped a fistful of her collar through the whole of it and would not be handed off, so she married his father with a baby on her hip and did not think there was any better way to do it. The house changed slowly, the way a house does when someone has decided to stay. The fences came up straight, the barn door hung true. Bread rose on the windowsill most mornings now, and 3 boys grew loud and round and ungovernable, and a man who had once run his ranch by pointing took to talking so much his wife told him, dry, that she half missed the quiet. The smell of sour milk and grief was gone out of the back room entirely, and in its place was the ordinary uproar of children who had been let to live. In the autumn of 1901, their youngest son was married under the cottonwood at the south end of the property. Wyatt, grown tall and broad-shouldered and quick to laugh, who all his life heard the story of the night a strange large woman put one finger in the dark and found the thing that everyone else had missed. He did not remember it, but he knew it the way you know the ground you were born on. And Eliza Crane, who had been told her whole life that she was too much, too large, too plain, too much woman for the narrow space the world wanted to allow her, stood at the edge of that gathering with her husband's hand in hers and watched the boy she had saved take up a whole life of his own, and felt no smallness in herself at all. She had never been too much. She had been exactly enough, every inch of her, and there had only ever been one tiny thing in all the world that no one else thought to look for. She had looked. That had made all the difference, and she had long since stopped asking anyone's permission to take up the space it took to do it.